Hello and welcome to the podcast, Making Blended Learning Work in VET. My name is Genna-Leigh and I currently am the Head Programmed Manager at Circulus Education. I've been working in the VET sector for over 6 years and have a key interest in the role that technology plays in the future of education. Joining me today is Sophie, the National Operations Manager from Futurum. Sophie has worked in small to large medium RTOs for the past 15 years. Welcome, Sophie.
Hi, Jenna.
Today we will be discussing blended learning in VET, the best practices and lessons learned. Firstly, let's clarify what blended learning is. Blended learning is a combination of face-to-face and online learning and teaching. Flipped learning asks that students do their reading at home, online, etc., and work more collaboratively in class with teachers and their peers. And there are many reasons as to why an RTO would want to introduce blended learning. Sophie, how about your experiences, the RTOs that you've worked for? What are the reasons that you have come across?
Quite often for us, the main reason people do it is to reduce costs, to step away from a paper-based environment, which, as we all know, RTOs are quite paper-based, paper-heavy. So that's one reason. I don't know that that's necessarily plays out, but certainly is a reason. Another reason that I've come across in an RTO that I worked for was being able to connect remote students. We had a national client who had students all across Australia, but only one or two in different locations, and it was unrealistic to be able to have full class sessions at each of those locations. So having a blended learning option and an online learning option gave us the ability to reach all of those students quite quickly and effectively and cost effectively, so it was a better option that way. Another reason that we're working with younger students who are very tech savvy. They all have a phone, they have a laptop, an iPad, and paper is not their favourite way of learning. They will all sit on their phones, and so let's make the most of that, the way that they engage with each other and their peers, with social media and social networking, and use a learning platform that aligns with that. I think that they've learnt through schools using an online or electronic and digital learning in schools, and then we tend to revert back to a paper-based learning when we get to RTOs, and that we need to try and continue that method that they've become accustomed to.
Yeah, talking about paperwork makes me obviously think about all the compliance concerns. Which obviously leads me into the question about, what are the reasons why RTOs would probably fear introducing blended learning into their businesses from obviously from a technology perspective and from a compliance perspective.
I think there's three main fears that people have. Firstly, and the biggest one, is compliance. How do I meet all of the requirements that I have to meet for the state, for the standards for registration, but also the contract compliance when we're state funded can be a really big ask, and quite often we fall back onto paper because that's the easy option. We know that if we get this form signed and this page completed, that we can make that compliant. It's a little bit of an unknown world when we go online and into that blended learning field. Another one is cost. People don't really understand what it's going to cost them to set it up, and that cost can grow depending on how you planned your project. And I think the final one is that lack of knowledge and the lack of skills about what does it mean? What do I need to know to be able to set up a program with an online platform or a blended learning program? Those three things are quite often enough to detract a lot of RTOs and tend to draw back to that status quo of paper, I think.
So, from your experience, you would say that it is possible to run a compliant program with introducing online functionality?
The compliance definitely plays a really big part. If it's done really well, it can make it really compliant, and it's really useful in being able to demonstrate how you connect with your students, how you're engaging with them. Online platforms allow you to see how often and for how long students were engaged in learning, which is really great. But by the same token, if they're not engaging in that learning program online, it also doesn't you can't show something that didn't exist. So if it's used well, it absolutely can connect students and show how we're delivering a really good quality program. And I think that's what we should be aiming for, is that quality program.
I totally agree that technology can help us with our compliance rather than hindering the compliance process. Something I'd like us to obviously discuss is, you and I have had conversations about our past experiences with introducing online learning and the problems that you and I have faced in RTO management. I'd like to present some examples of those scenarios and the lessons that you've learnt and the lessons that I've learnt.
Yeah.
I know that when I introduced an e-learning platform or online learning into an RTO, I really didn't know what I was signing up for. When you introduce online learning, the first thing that comes to mind is the cost that you're going to save when introducing online learning. And very soon realised that introducing online learning does not mean that you get rid of the personal aspect. We soon realised that we needed to have a mentor department. We needed to continuously have our trainers available to students when they needed to have that assistance. And you didn't get rid of all the personal aspect of it just because you're getting rid of a classroom. Yeah. And then we also very soon realised that blended learning was the better way to go to make sure that the students get the support they need face to face, because some students function better that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've been part of an RTO where we did run a program completely online and forget that we needed to nudge students and say, hey, how are you going? And direct them to engage in that program. We expected that they would go, great, I'm online, and work away at all of their assignments and their assessments, but we didn't expect them to just be needed to have their hand held through that program. And so we had the same experience where we thought we could reduce the staff that needed to be involved in the day-to-day of that training, except that it changed the way that we needed the involvement. We needed to have people to help the students to log in. I've forgotten my password. I've submitted an assignment, but I wasn't really finished. I need to resubmit it again. All those questions. So you need the tech support to be able to manage the day-to-day of this, but you also need the trainers. They need to be available to ask questions, and they need to be able to respond. And people expect that if they send an email or send an inquiry, that they're going to get a really quick response. But we weren't planning for that and didn't have that level of personnel behind it.
Yeah.
And had those issues.
So how do you think that you and I could have avoided these mistakes? What's the starting point?
For me, you've got to plan your project. So and you've also, it's beyond planning. You need to know what the scope of it is. One of the things that we did was got really excited about how this could make our life so much easier. And we thought, well, this is great. It's online, so we can have assessments done online, and then you can mark things automatically, and then that could feed into our student management system, and then that would work. That was quicker. But we kind of ran away with what this big picture looked like, and then couldn't work out how to narrow it down into a smaller bite-sized project that we could actually work with. And so we got lost in that scope of the potential, and the potential is still there. I think that those are the exciting things that can come out of these kind of projects, but we need to decide on what is it that you want it to look like, what does the big picture look like, and then what am I going to start with? What's my very first target that I want to do, and how am I going to move forward with that?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. I think the key to introducing this type of system into a business is to truly understand why you're doing it. What is the why behind it? Making sure that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
Making sure that your trainers are trained up. But I think the main key thing is to have that plan in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I will honestly admit that when I started that e-learning into the business, there are many things that I didn't think about. And one of the key things I probably would have changed is hiring an expert to come in to mentor us, to mentor the change management and scoping out the project.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. We had the business I worked in had a person who was really skilled in setting up the program online and knew the ins and outs of it, but that was the only person. So everyone else involved in writing a program, designing a program, implementing it, didn't have their head around how it worked, which meant we also didn't know what we could do and what we couldn't do, or what we would need to have in place to allow that to work. And as a result, I don't think the rest of the team gets engaged in it either. So people will prefer to just, look, it's easier for me to just do the face-to-face learning and the paper-based assessments because I get that. And so having that the expertise in place to set it up, but also to educate your team, to get them involved and show them, what does this mean for your role? How do you work with it, and how does it work with you?
Yeah, and I mean, let's be fair, the expert made the mistakes that we were about to make. So they've already made those mistakes. I think one of the key things as well that I learned was how different the delivery is when you introduce online learning. Things that we didn't think about, even in running webinars. How many of the current staff that we had didn't know how to do that. Yeah. There was the fear factor of running webinars, and just little tips and tricks and all those type of things. Again, just bringing you back down to the PD and knowing what beast you're really tackling and making sure you're getting that advice and getting everybody trained up. Yeah. Key factor, I would say.
Yeah, and it's really important that people can embrace the technology and
great point. Great point.
Because you will invest in this platform that you're going to set your online learning up on, and you've invested in an expert to help you, or you've invested in the professional development for your team to have it. But unless you embrace it and find a way to really push it into all of your programs and make the most of it, that's not really a cost saving. That's money that you're losing. So you've got to find ways to really make it exciting. And there's so many ways to make e-learning exciting and engaging for students and reach people and fit their their lifestyles and their schedules. And
that's right. And it's not a set and forget scenario. And I think that's a lot of RTOs' mistakes that are made, is that you think that your RTO life becomes easier when you introduce it, but it doesn't. It becomes easier in certain aspects, but it also becomes more exciting. I mean, you know how I feel about technology. I get very excited about it, and I think it's the future of education. And I think one of the key things in this, and again, one of the lessons I learned and how we knew where we were going wrong, was asking the students, seeing those dropout rates, going, why are we getting dropout rates? And actually researching where we went wrong and making sure that we have clear learning goals. What are we wanting to see from the student? Making sure that, you have some set mentor dates to follow up on the student and catch up with the student, so the student actually feels like they are in a learning environment rather than just, in virtual land. And I think that's why blended learning has become so important.
I agree. I think that we're sort of seeing a shift now away from online learning and into this blended learning, which has an engagement with the trainer and with each other, with students, using things like forums, chat forums and Skype sessions, or, webinars within it, rather than just that. What I remember as my first exposure to e-learning or online learning was this, not dissimilar to a PowerPoint presentation on my screen and yes and no, or questions that I answered, and that was it. Being able to make use of all of the other aspects that we've got, the social media aspects and methods to get people involved, not just with their trainer but with each other, and have that somewhat similar to a classroom learning environment where you get a person, you meet a person, you hear about their experiences. That's still possible to do online, and that's where it changed from, I think, being online learning into this blended learning.
Yeah, also with the online learning is making sure that it's a little bit more engaging. Again, coming across so many RTOs that think putting a PDF online.
Yeah, I think we've all seen that happen, where a dump of text on a page, which really only lends itself to being printed out. And I remember my very first online course that I did, that's all I wanted to do was print it out, because big blocks of text on a screen is just not something that I could work through and learn from. I needed to be able to make notes and reference it. Whereas we use now videos and so many different ways to learn.
That's right. And I mean, there's also so many people or companies, should I say, that are available nowadays where you can get this type of content. They specialise in it. They've researched what works for students and what doesn't work for students.
It's interactive and it's exciting.
It's very exciting, and I think a combination of engaging material and understanding that also, students need that face-to-face time. So having that engaging content and having some face-to-face time and having some phone call times and having some webinars and a combination of all of that really lends itself to a successful blended program. And I think that if you add all of those key items together, in my opinion, I'd say that you're on a winner. Yeah,
absolutely. We've got to keep students engaged, and we want outcomes for them. They want outcomes from their program. We talked about before the resources and the lack of resources. I think they're different resources that we need with a blended learning system. We need to look at what's the platform that we're using, the technology that we're using, but also the people. How are you going to facilitate it? And whereas you would have had a trainer for from 9 till 4, you now have to look at what does that trainer do and how are they connecting.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously trainers that you would normally put in front of a class all of a sudden isn't the same trainer that you can apply to the online aspect of the course. And it's really about having a look at what are the skills that you need for every bit of the business now, because the business model totally changes when you introduce it. And obviously, it's something that you need to, as we mentioned, you need to plan, you need to assess it, you need to make sure that everybody's involved and everybody's got buy-in to make sure that it works. And one of the key things is to have systems and processes in place. As always, I know you're a big fan of your processes. So am I. You've got to have them.
You do, and I think that's the difference between making it a compliant system and a non-compliant system. So by having those workflows and those systems and monitoring those systems, checking in with them and using those in your favour, they're the things that can allow you to use this to demonstrate that students are engaged, that they're participating in training and how much they were participating in training. And really, I know in Victoria our focus is on evidence of participation. This is a really great way to capture that and link it to the units and the learning that they're doing, because you can see exactly what they're dropping into and how long they were spending on learning and how long they were spending on assessments. You can really use that to your advantage, but only if you do have the systems and those workflows in place and that you use them, can you make any benefit from it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, once again, blended learning for me is definitely the way to go. And I think, in your opinion, I would say that you've also had some good experiences and some bad experiences. What would you say, or what would be the biggest tip that you could give other RTOs thinking about implementing blended learning? What type of information would you be able to give them to say, well, this is the most important, or don't think this?
Oh, it's really hard to put your finger on just one. We talked about planning. I think planning and scoping your project is really, really important. Do both. Plan big and see how what do you really want it to look like, because that's important to setting up the right foundations in the beginning. But then looking at how am I going to implement this. Bite-sized pieces. I think that's really, really vital. I think the other thing is this is investment.
Yeah.
Look at what you're investing in. But, we're investing in resources, we're investing in technology, but we need to invest time into this project. One of the things that we'll spend all this time planning and working out what we're going to do, and then we turn it on and expect it to just run. And the investment in the time investment in getting it up to where you want it to be, that's really, really key.
It does
and
take
I think
time.
we forget to trial and test and have that period of there's going to be mistakes, and we need to be able to learn from those mistakes and work from there.
So start on a small group.
Yes, start small. Pick a unit. Pick a even if it's a short course or a small program that you run. Work with that. Get feedback from your students and your trainers and all of your team that are involved in it, so that you get information from every direction about how did it work for your admin team. Did it make their lives easier or harder? Because if it's making their life harder, then they're not going to embrace it. How did the trainers feel about it? What was their thoughts and experiences? Was it worse for them to be out because they had to contact all these students individually, or did it make it easier because there was some automatic assessment pieces to it? But how was their students' experience? Because that's the biggest part. We talk about outcomes and getting them completed and getting them a qualification, but what was their experience in getting to that end point? Was it great? Because if it was great, they're going to say to their friends, hey, I've got this really good course, and they don't care about the piece of paper at the end so much as what did they learn and how was that learning experience. And this is an opportunity to turn a fairly dull learning experience in some cases into something that's really memorable and worthwhile for students.
Yeah, no, totally. I think we were saying before, my biggest lesson when I asked you the question, the first thing that popped into my mind was mentors. You got to have that support available to the students. And when you're introducing these systems, you're thinking, I hate to say the dirty word, but you're gonna save money, and look, there's aspects to saving money. I think it gives you the opportunity to grow. It gives a business opportunity to grow, and I think that's where you save the money. But don't think that you can do this without having a mentor system in place. Your students need someone to call, they need someone to email, and they need to have a trainer on the other side that can help them through the journey. Hence why blended learning also works, is because you have that face-to-face contact as well.
I think the other thing is, you talked about it, it's not a set and forget solution, and it's not a set and forget in terms of people and contact points, but it's also not I've built that's fine now. You've got to continuously look for other ways to make it better and improve, and there's always new technology being developed and new systems in place that we can make the most of. So be mindful that what you start with will grow and it will change, and you'll come up with another way that will work better, and use that feedback and use your mechanisms to your advantage. I
think to leave on a note, I think would be that people need to be passionate about it. I think that's the key thing to making it work, is having that passion for this sphere, as you and I do, hence why we're here. And I think if they have that passion, then a lot of the other stuff will just slot into place. Yeah,
absolutely. That fear of change is what's inherent in everybody. But, I know this, I'm comfortable with this. But the excitement that can come from a system that has all of these other benefits for your team and for students is really, really worth embracing. But you've got to be able to share that passion that we have for something with everyone else and get them on board, and professional development, and get them involved in it, even if it's using that same e-learning process and blended learning process for your team in your professional development. Let them see how it experience it and work with it. I think that's when you'll start to see the change. People will work with you if they believe in it as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, thanks, Sophie, for joining me today. As usual, it's lovely having you and having these conversations. I hope we have one coming up soon.
Thank you, Jenna.
All right, speak to you soon, Sophie.
Bye.